do you feel about cubes? So in my previous videos, I talked more so about art history without discussing like the art style itself. I more so talked about the historical impact of it. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about an art movement, and then I'm going to be trying out the style of that movement for myself. This stuff on my face, I don't think is really technically cubism, but you know what? Doesn't matter. So I already talked about Impressionism before, and Impressionism started in the mid to late 1800s, and from there it branched off into two different categories. One is Expressionism, and then Formalism. So Expressionism is wanting to convey emotion. Think like Edvard Munch's The Scream. That would be an Expressionist painting. Whereas with Formalism, someone is trying to break down parts of a scenery or like a landscape into its bare form. So think like Cezanne. A lot of his artwork is taking a scenery and then breaking it down into basic shapes and flattening it. So Cubism is a type of formalism that started around 1907. It involves a lot of experimenting again with form and color and the illusion of like what is there. The two main like founders of the Cubist movement are Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. These artists largely got their inspiration from African artworks, largely work that would have been stolen or taken from a place and then put into what is called an ethnographic museum, which I will touch on in a little bit. But most of these artworks are usually cultural items or spiritual items that come from West Africa, particularly around the Congo region. And many of these sculptures or items in general included stylized faces, usually longer noses, small kind of pursed lips, deeply carved, usually almond-shaped eyes, and larger foreheads with pointed chins. And we can see that implemented into a lot of Cubist artwork, particularly with Pablo Picasso's work, which is part of the reason that my makeup kind of looks a little crazy right now, is because I didn't want to do work, and like I didn't want to do something that was like basically just a rip-off of West African culture, so that's why it looks a little crazy right now. So further expanding on the idea of an ethnographic museum is specifically a museum that holds items from another place or culture, meaning that this is not an art museum, because it was believed by colonizers that people in uncivilized areas could not create art. We even have a quote from Pablo Picasso in which he says, "A smell of mold and neglect caught me by the throat. I was so depressed that I would have chosen to leave immediately, but I forced myself to stay, to examine these masks. All of these objects that people had created with a sacred, magical purpose to serve as intermediaries between them and the unknown, hostile forces surrounding them, attempting in that way to overcome their fears by giving them color and form. And then I understood what painting really meant. It is not an aesthetic process. It is a form of magic, that interpretation itself between us and the hostile universe, a means of seizing power by imposing a form of our own terrors as well as our desires. The day I understood that, I had found my path." Now, while it is true that many of the masks and cultural items that were on display in these museums did have spiritual significance, it's in pretty poor taste to sort of mystify them in the way that he does. You know, these are people having to overcome their fears of such a hostile, uncivilized, terrible world that is Africa. And these objects are not meant to overcome fear in that sense. If anything, they are meant to convey a specific purpose. A lot of these items taken from West Africa are called nkisi, which are spiritual objects used for a specific task, including but not limited to protecting a loved one, holding someone to their word, and encouraging fertility. One specific item that we covered in my art history class comes from the Fang people, and this is an object that meets the specific, or not really specific, but the general requirements that I covered earlier with the deeply cut eyes, longer flattened nose, tiny pursed lips, larger foreheads, and like smaller chins. And this is specifically a spiritual item that is usually activated by rubbing oil on it in general, which is part of what gives it that color. But it also invoked a sense of fear in colonizers who were going into that area, because they saw these items, knew that they were of some spiritual significance, but they also knew that these people weren't Christians, and therefore they were scared of it. So a lot of these people would take these items and then send them back to Europe to put them in museums and have them on display for other white people, and then not acknowledge the spiritual significance of them at all, and essentially cut these people off from their culture through colonization and slavery, among other things, which is like really cool of Pablo Picasso to go and look at them and then specifically refer to them as masks and items and not as artworks or, you know, spiritual works. Super cool. And we can see examples of how people like Picasso implemented these African masks into their work. With Picasso's Lady of Avignon, the women have long, angular noses, deep-cut, almond-shaped eyes, pursed lips, and pointed chins. We see something very similar in Ernest Kirchner's self-portrait as a soldier, with the same previously described features. However, I do want to clarify that Kirchner is technically a German expressionist and not a cubist painter, but still like very close in terms of like general time period. That being said, I'm now going to create my own work based on what I have seen of the cubist art style. I am not going to be using Picasso as inspiration for this because I do not want to appropriate African art and culture. So I'm actually going to be taking inspiration from Georges Braque. He did have some slight elements, but like if you look at their works, you can clearly tell that Picasso definitely has much more Africanized elements to his art. There's also the fact that Pablo Picasso was a dick, so let's go with Braque. Some facts about Georges Braque. He was born May 13th, 1882. He is well known for his Cubist and Fauvist works and was a main contributor to the Cubist movement. In fact, we actually get the term Cubism from a work that he tried to submit to a gallery. The judges rejected it and cited his little cubes as a reason. He was a huge fan of Impressionist painter Cezanne, who I previously mentioned. Specifically, he was excited about Cezanne's idea of distorting perspective. Braque died on 31st of August, 1863 in Paris. Either fun or morbid fact, the church that overlooks the cemetery that he is buried in has windows that were actually designed by Braque himself. Okay, so this is my finished cubist work. I actually expected to hate it a lot when I did it, but I actually, like, in retrospect, I really like it. I definitely will try cubism again. I didn't really go off of a specific, like, model. I didn't try to distort any specific forms. I just kind of, like, tried to implement certain aspects and just sort of play with it as I go. But if you do see anything specific in this, either through the creation process or in this display of it right now, it's very bright, but if you see anything, let me know, you know? That being said, I hope that you enjoyed this very brief look at Cubism and this experimentation with Cubist art. If you want to try Cubist art out for yourself, let me know how that goes. And if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, of course. And check out some of my other videos. I didn't really go over, like, actually trying to do the artwork that I described in them. If you want to see that in the future, let me know. I absolutely will do that. That being said, have a good day. Bye.